Hello.
Hi.
Oh, so excited to be here with you. We are going to go ahead and get started. My name is Channing Moreland, and I am co-founder of Eva. And with me here today, we have Kris Campbell, founder of Speaker Casting. Kris, thanks so much for being here.
I'm so excited. This is going to be really special.
Absolutely. And we are so thrilled to bring to you today, behind the mic, a front row seat to a backstage conversation. Kris, do you want to tell our viewers a little bit about what to expect from this series?
Sure. This is just an idea that was born over many years of working with speakers and clients and booking speakers for clients, obviously. It's that idea that you know a lot about the speaker. We always do before we book them, but there are always surprising things that we learned once we've worked with them. And those kinds of things, whether it's just going deeper or finding out the special passions they have or special surprising talents that go beyond the keynote, things like that. And we wanted this series to be not only a closer look at the speaker and a candid look at the speaker, where you're actually just chatting with them as a real person, not just a figure on the stage, but also to talk about those things and have some fun with it, and hopefully give our friends, our buyers, our clients, potential clients, a bit of an inside peek, a bit of a jump start, and maybe some thought-provoking things for the next time they want to book someone.
Absolutely. And I am thrilled that this has come from a long-time collaboration together and really our unique approach in how we source, discover, and place keynote speakers for our clients. And so it was a no-brainer to us for our first guest to be one of our favorites, Chris Barton, founder of Shazam. And we are really excited to have Chris on with us, joining in just a few minutes. We are going to ask him some key questions that after we have booked him, we have really gotten to see how much he brings to the stage. So we're going to ask questions about that. But first, I want to tell, in case you don't know, I want to tell you a few amazing facts about Chris, and then we will go from there and bring him on. So Chris Barton, he wanted a way to identify songs anywhere he heard them, and there wasn't one. So he invented an app you may have heard called Shazam. Mind you, 6 years before the iPod and 8 years before the iPhone and iTunes. Chris absolutely changed the way the world discovers music, and he laid the groundwork for the consumer AI industry we know today. In addition to creating Shazam, Chris holds over 12 patents and played key roles in the early days of Google and Dropbox. And Chris's newest venture, which I am absolutely mind blown by, is called Guard, which aims to use AI to detect drowning in swimming pools, a never before accomplished effort. In his speeches, Chris's story and storytelling completely captivates audiences, and he inspires people to make big things happen in their organizations. A statement that I love that's been coined is to create magic in defiance of obstacles.
Let's get an amazing visual before we bring out the man of the hour.
Perfect. Let's do it.
I had a crazy idea. I had a crazy idea for something that's impossible.
Shazam can identify any song in between 2 to 5 seconds.
And these are professors at Stanford and MIT. They said there is no technology that can do that. It's impossible because of the noise and the scale.
You've got a product that most of us around the world all are delighted by. What do you think created this belief inside of you that says, I can do things people say are impossible?
There was no iTunes, there was no Spotify, there was no digital database. We invented the algorithm that everyone said was impossible. And that's what I wanted to tell you about today. The creation of Shazam, but also the ways to think differently to create anything.
Chris has 12 patents.
How did we do this? How did we create this thing that people find magical?
Awesome. So now we are going to bring Chris on stage. Chris Barton, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me, Channing.
And Chris.
Amazing.
Thank you.
Two Chris's. You're going to have to.
I know. I'm Chris
tell
with
us
a
which-
K. You're
Yeah.
Chris with a C. Yeah.
Well, before we dive into our questions, Chris Barton, we would love to hear in your own words a brief overview of what your keynote is about so our listeners can hear straight from you.
Yeah. So basically, my keynote brings the story of creating Shazam, everything starting from not even having an idea and painting back to that era when mobile phones were very basic, all the way through a long set of obstacles to an amazing outcome 18 years later where Apple bought Shazam. And what I really weave this story around what I see as the 5 key learnings for helping people think in a different way, to bring amazing things to life, to be innovative, to overcome obstacles, to be resilient, to be creative. And these 5 things they're sort of things that I view as non-obvious, sort of surprising ways of thinking that I mapped out by triangulating my experience in creating Shazam against my other experiences working at Google in the early days before it was a public company, and at Dropbox when it was just a startup with about 90 people. And so that's my keynote. So full of great stories, firsthand stories, and lessons that are usable by really anyone in their professional lives and their personal lives for leveraging technologies and AI to really change the way things are done.
That's amazing. And before booking you, of course, Chris and I, we dive in and we watch all your videos. We read your bio. We go into your website, and of course, we can gather from that you're going to bring this inventive spirit to the stage. But what was really exciting to see firsthand, being in the audience after we booked you, was you navigated expressing the natural highs and lows of entrepreneurship through this great timeline in your keynote that was also so cinematic and immersive. And what was your inspiration for creating such an immersive keynote? That's my second question. I have another one coming.
Shazam is a delightful product, right? Clearly, I feel so fortunate that it's had that outcome. But the result of that is this obsession with creating a beautiful experience and a beautiful product. And I really, as I got into keynote speaking, I wanted to do the same thing. I mean, to me, keynote speaking was like another Shazam. It was another product that I wanted it to be amazing and delightful. And so the way you create a delightful product is you really kind of think beyond the traditional ways, and you kind of define in your own perspective, what could be amazing without necessarily just replicating what's already out there. And so as I thought about my keynote, I realized that I could sort of create this sort of cinematic and musical experience that would really bring it to life. I studied sort of a lot of speaking and keynote speaking and so on, and I realized I took away learnings around the impact of visuals, the impact of analogies, and the impact of video, the impact of music. And clearly Shazam is a musical product, so why not weave music throughout the keynote? And so what I do is I bring to life some of the songs that were in the charts at different moments of time in the Shazam story, which brings this kind of musical experience into the keynote. Yeah, people love it. A lot of these songs are recognizable to audiences. And also I bring together these sort of cinematic videos combined with music that convey some of these core concepts so that the lessons that I'm sharing with the audience are really memorable and accessible to the audience after the keynote, because I want it to be memorable. I want it to be something that a keynote that people are just not going to forget.
Well, you've done that. And I just have to say thank you for taking such a refreshing approach to, being on stage. I mean, it's not an easy thing to do. And I think because of who you are and not having been in the speaking industry for decades like we have, it probably, helped. You got to walk out there and go, I'm doing this my way. Anyway, super. I just keep using the word refreshing. And obviously, when I first read about you, I was like, well, how am I going to get something from this? Because you're so creative and so innovative, and you had this experience in your life that I haven't had. But boy, you did the thing that makes profound ideas and ways of thinking actually I could get it, I could apply it to
Mhm.
my little life. Anyway, I have to ask you. Oh, go ahead. It looks like you wanted to say something.
Well, I was just going to add that the other thing that I really felt natural to me is I wanted to bring the personal aspect, the kind of vulnerability of myself into the story, because really I see this, I'm thinking of this keynote experience through the eyes of the audience, and I think that we can all relate to this. We all have this moment where we think, oh gosh, I have an idea for something that would be so great, right? Something that doesn't exist. Wouldn't it be great if all my mail just got opened for me and I didn't have to open my mail, or whatever it is, right? We all have those
Right.
moments where we just have some frustration in our personal lives or professional lives, and we just for a moment dream up, oh, maybe a time machine where I could just go and redo that, or know what's going to happen. And so I think in terms of the audience has all had that experience, and I'm really just another person that just happened to have created this thing that people now have on their phones. So I kind of try to make the story and the experience very conversational, very accessible, and as I said, sort of personal. So I struggled with dyslexia throughout my life, and it made things a challenge. And Shazam itself was an incredible challenge that many people don't realize, of just hitting these big obstacles and barely surviving for years. And I think people can relate to that, because we've all had difficult things. We've all had that moment when we poured our heart into a new career or a company that we joined, or who knows what it is, a personal goal, and then we just got close to rock bottom and almost gave up on things. And Shazam has that story, and so I think people can relate to that, because then, luckily it was almost like made for Hollywood. But there's that, it all kind of came back, and
well,
so that's that.
You did such a good job, and you brought this up. I mean, the best speakers, I'm going to compliment you here, but are the ones that make it about the audience. And thank you for doing that, because you nailed that one. So I got another question. You mentioned that Shazam was an idea well before its time. And I know a lot about first movers advantage, but I think you would agree that there's also something to be said for this first mover's disadvantage. And you touched on this a little bit. How did you survive all those challenges? They seem insurmountable during those years, the early years.
Yeah, I mean, so one thing within the venture capital community, that the big firms that invest millions of dollars into startups, that it's a known thing that in addition to having a great idea and implementing it really well, another thing that's important is timing, and bringing things to life at the right time. And Shazam missed the mark on that one by about 6 years. So we were way too early. I mean, it would be like,
it seemed to work out.
We essentially we created artificial intelligence, AI, 24 years ago, right? I mean, with the invention of AI is basically AI has evolved in the methodology and how it's done. So at the time we used what was called pattern recognition. Now since then it's become machine learning, and then deep learning and neural network processing and so on. But so it's not generative AI, but it was AI. And I don't think it's a good thing that no one told me it was AI, because I think that would have scared me off. I just thought, oh, we're going to invent this technology, but yeah, I mean, we hit a lot of obstacles because we were so early, and we actually launched a service in 2002 that anyone could use in our first market, which was the United Kingdom. Anyone with a mobile phone could use Shazam by dialing a phone number, making a phone call into our service, and we answered the phone, recorded the sound, and sent a text message back to their phone with the name of the songs, because that's all phones could do. There was no app, there were no apps, no color screens. The screens were monochrome. I think it was like the typical screen had 78 by 84 pixels. And so it's just a monochrome screen. And really the only thing you looked at on your screen was a text message. And that was about it, maybe your contact
Wow.
book. So yeah, so the original Shazam was a phone number. You dialed the phone number, held your phone up. We then recorded the sound, terminated the phone call, and sent a text message back to your phone with the name of the song. And so it was still delightful, even though that sounds so simple. When you showed this to people at the time, this was really the only thing you could do with a phone other than make phone calls or send text messages. So people kind of thought, wow, I can't believe a phone could do that. So I remember, yeah, that part was amazing. You'd show it to people, they'd all think it's amazing. So we thought, the founders and all the early employees we hired, we were about 30 people at the time. We thought it was just going to just take off like wildfire. It was just so delightful, but it was really hard. We launched, and because there's so much friction, which is something I talk about in the experience, and having to know a phone number, having to being limited just to a text message in the result, not having a way to buy the song after you get it. There were no iTunes, there was no downloadable song, so you'd have to go to a record store if you want to get the song. So all that friction really limited us, and we actually got a pretty small number of users, and it was very costly to get the message out to try to get more users. Thinking we made money by charging per use. So it was a bit like at the time, directory inquiries at 411, if you wanted to get a phone number, you paid 50 cents on your mobile phone bill. And so we did the same thing, 50 cents on your phone bill each time you use Shazam. But yeah, we got a trickle of revenue relative to the huge amount of money we're spending operating this business. And we were really struggling.
Wow.
It's amazing to see the evolution. I mean, before I got to hear that story you shared in your keynote, I didn't even know the very beginnings of, where Shazam started to where it is now. I mean, it's a verb now. I use it on the daily, which is crazy. So I was wondering, with how I left that keynote being so inspired, learning so much about you, what do you typically hear from audiences after the keynote? What do they come? What are they sharing? What are they like oozing out, wanting to share with you afterwards?
Oh gosh, I've started to keep like a list because it's so fun to hear the different things. I some that just come to mind. I remember it was one keynote, a couple thousand people in Atlanta, and someone came running up to me and said, I feel like I just watched a Netflix movie. And I just thought,
that's a good one.
I was like, yeah. I hopefully it was a good Netflix movie. But I guess that the sense of that engagement just so deeply in the experience, and like maybe the cinematic and musical component to it, but it just kind of, how in a movie you kind of fall into the movie, and at the end you forget you were even watching a movie because you're so engrossed in it. And so yes. I take it as that was what he was trying to convey. I've had other people say, gosh, I can't believe that was 60 minutes, because often at 60 minutes of someone speaking, if it's, can feel like a long time sometimes. But this 60 minutes does not. It's immersive. It's immersive, and it's because there's so many stories, and the stories are all tied to this experience that I had. And so I think the audience feels like they're in it as well. And then I've had, interestingly, I'll get people, because I really like to focus on being inspirational, being inspiring, and sort of because I'm trying to overcome these hurdles in the story, and not just I, but we, all the people creating Shazam, but from my perspective, and so because we finally get there and we achieve these things, it can be very inspirational. I mean, if you've ever seen a movie in the theater, and then you come out and you're like, I'm going to go do this new thing with my life because you feel so inspired. Well, I sometimes get that. I'll have people come up to me and say, I've decided I'm going to write a book on poetry. And I mean, there's nothing about poetry in my keynote. Yeah. But it was like that person clearly was thinking, should I write a book on poetry? And then this was that final thing of like that inspiration of, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. Or I've had a product manager at a tech company at a 2,000 person keynote in Barcelona. Like, oh, that's it. Now I really am going to launch this new product or build this new product that we need that feels so difficult to build. That was another one. Sometimes I get these as like a little LinkedIn message after the keynote. Oh, there was one keynote I gave that was just amazing. It was this one was about 5,000 about
Wow.
young kind of college student level age
Oh, what
kids
a
in
great
Turkey.
audience.
Yeah, and it was in Turkey. It was in Istanbul, and they were basically selected as the top 2% of students in Turkey, college students, and they were invited to this exclusive event. They're the future leaders of Turkey. And after that keynote, I just had a million messages in my Instagram of their inspiration, and they're like,
Wow.
"Oh my gosh, thank you so much."
Ah,
And you can, and they're kind of thinking about what they want to do with their lives and what's possible. And I
Mhm.
think that this story makes you feel like, wow, you really can go do that thing that seems out of reach, right?
yeah,
Um, and
it's
and what and,
amazing.
it, and it, when you're a young college student, it might be just that job that's really hard to get, or it might be whatever, some new thing that you're
Yeah,
unproven in. So yeah, so
exactly.
those are some of the things
You're
that I
accomplishing a
hear.
lot with this keynote. And we got a couple more big questions to ask you. So, and I'm noting the time. So, Channing, I think you've got another one, don't you?
Yes. One question I have is I love the concept that you share about how great inventions and innovations come by building on basic truths. And what were the basic truths that drove Shazam?
Yeah, so the basic truth concept is it's also known as first principles thinking. It's the type of thinking for great innovations that's used by great innovators, has been used by great innovators like Leonardo da Vinci and Steve Jobs, Henry Ford, and it's a methodology for thinking in a different way because our brains are not programmed to think this way. Um, and it's basically making sure that you don't make assumptions. You're not starting from what you know from the assumptions, but you're starting from only from what the basic truths are, the raw ingredients. And in the case of Shazam, uh, the basic truths were that all these mobile phones that everyone had all had microphones, because clearly you need a microphone to talk on a mobile phone, otherwise you can't hear what the other person's saying. So they all had microphones. That's one basic truth. There's no assumption there. And then another basic truth was that music is audible, right? It's sound, and so clearly sound can be picked up by a microphone. Now this all sounds so obvious now, but that's what led to this concept that had never existed. This idea that we could just use the sound of the music in the air coming to the microphone of the phone, no matter where you are, even if you're in places with the ambient noise like a bar, a club, a cafe, a movie theater, and then we would identify the song. But there was no technology to do that prior to this. And everyone else, there were 6 other companies that tried to do things similar to Shazam, and they were all focused on leveraging existing technologies that monitored radio stations. And so they didn't start from the basic truths. They started from the assumption that you must need this radio monitoring technology in order to have a music recognition service that would only work for radio stations. So that's what basic truths are. It's a way of thinking when you really want to come up with a breakthrough idea.
Wow, that's something I'm going to be chewing on for a while. Just that whole, how do I do that? Okay. So your invention obviously changed how people discover music. I mean, we all love that about Shazam. When did you actually appreciate the impact of your invention? I mean, because you were
Wow,
talking
yeah,
about those early days, and I'm wondering,
yeah.
when did that happen?
There were a few different moments, sort of like milestones. The first big one was a full 6 years after launching Shazam service. Imagine.
Wow.
So so we launched the service and we had this barely any users for all these years, struggling, near bankruptcy, and then something happened, and that was the launch of the App Store by Apple. When the launch of the App Store occurred in 2008, that was on the iPhone. Back then, there were only, I don't know the number, but a few million iPhones in the world. And we were chosen by Apple as being one of the apps that would be included in the very first launch of the App Store. There were only about less than 500 apps total.
That's big.
And then when it launched, they immediately had this system where they ranked the popularity of the apps, and you could see it live. And that was the first moment, because when that launched, I was looking at that ranking, and we would just sit there among the top most popular apps, and we just stayed there as one of the most popular apps. And it was just the pure organic proof of how much people were loving Shazam, even up against some of the most selective group of apps that
Right.
Apple could put together for launch. so that was one big moment, and that lasted. I admit I was addicted. I just kept checking those app store rankings almost hourly. And I was like, oh wow, we're
How could
still
you
up
not? Yeah.
there. That was huge. Then a year later, Apple announced who the most popular apps were of all apps. By that point, there were just millions and millions and millions of downloads, and there we were up there with some big famous companies like Google and Facebook and
Wow.
Skype and so on. So that was the second moment. There were multiple ones though, because just other great things happened over there. A TV show was made, a game show, one of the highest budget game shows of all time, and the first one with an Academy Award winner as the game show host, Jamie Foxx. That was created around Shazam years later, and that was also, it's like, wow, I can't believe they made a prime time game show with an Academy Award winning Jamie Foxx as the host, all oriented around Shazam. So yeah, there are a few moments, but those would be some of them.
That's pretty cool. Well, wait a minute. Was there a story about you being in the checkout line?
Oh yes, yeah.
We got to hear that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, yeah. So, well, yeah, I was talking about more sort of the So there's also personal moments. So as you might expect, as Shazam became popular, I would start to once in a while seeing being used in the wild, right? So it might be at a gym. I would see someone using it, see someone Shazamming over in the corner of the gym, or of course at at a bar where there's a lot of music being played.
Right.
But one that really highlight, because I always had this dream that Shazam is just something you can use anywhere, and I was always obsessed with this idea that people might use it in really unpredictable places. For example, I thought maybe a car drives down the street playing music and someone Shazams the music of the car as it drives by. Maybe it's even a policeman Shazamming the car. So I always had this. That was for some reason really intriguing to me. And so one of them is a grocery store. You don't think of a grocery store as a Shazamming place. And I was in this little grocery store in San Francisco, and I was waiting in line to buy my groceries, and suddenly the person in front of me suddenly says, not to me, but says to the cashier where they're checking out, they said, "Hey, what's that song?" And the cashier just said, and remember, these are strangers, they don't even know each other. The cashier says, "I don't know what it is, but let's Shazam it." And so I'm just like inches away, and then suddenly, like, these two people who don't even know each other, strangers, they just know about Shazam. They talk about it like it's just something that everyone knows, which is such a weird thing. And I'm watching the whole thing, and they're like, so suddenly they start Shazamming this song in this grocery store, and I'm standing there just inches away watching
with a smile this big.
Yeah, and I didn't say anything, but I'm just witnessing it, and literally it was just so moving for me, because it just. After that, such a long journey, right? It's such a long journey, and so moving to just watch these two strangers interacting, talking about Shazam, using Shazam in this moment in such an obscure place, such as a little tiny grocery store, and yeah, it was amazing. It was a real highlight for me.
Absolutely incredible.
Yes, so incredible. We want to thank you so much for taking the time to be here. You're our first guest. You'll probably always be our favorite.
Of course.
I think about, the more I learn about you and your story and the messages behind it, because you did such a good job with, taking all of that and making it about us. The more I realize I need to learn. I have a feeling I'm going to be processing this for quite a while, which is a compliment. I hope that you take it that way.
Absolutely. And these comments have been amazing. I don't know if you've had a chance to see them, but I love everyone's talking about their first Shazam moment or Shazamming in the grocery store, like it's hearing their own music on the radio for the first time. So cool. Thank you for everyone for tuning in. Chris Barton, thank you so much. We are grateful for your inventions, and just keep creating, because you are incredible.
Well, thanks for putting together such an amazing event and inviting me to it. It was such a delight. And thanks for having me on the first inaugural episode of this show.
Yeah, yes. I'm sure you'll be hearing from us soon.
Absolutely.
Take care.
Amazing. Bye. Awesome. Well, we will go ahead and wrap up. That was incredible. So good.
So we're doing this again soon.
Tell us about it.
Yeah. Our next event will be literally 1 month from today. So August 22nd, same time, same place. Oh, you'll be hearing more about it on LinkedIn or Facebook, wherever you happen to go regularly. And our next speaker, I just want to tell you a little something about it so you have a chance to check her out and get a little excited. Her name is Denise Soler Cox. Denise has become a storyteller for millions of people as she translated her experience and curiosity for cultural belonging into an award-winning documentary film called Being Enye. It's a heartfelt message of belonging, and it connects deeply. This is the part that's fascinating. Although the film was created for her community, it connects deeply with people from every walk of life and people all over the world. You're not going to want to miss her. She's really special. And I think this whole idea of belonging, what's happened in the DEI community even, although that's not typically where she always fits, but that whole world is moving into this space. Belonging is one of the hottest topics right now, and you're not going to want to miss it.
Well
Hope to see
said.
you there.
I'm so excited for that. It's going to be great to have Denise on. Thank you for everyone for joining Behind the Mic, a front row seat to a backstage conversation, and we will see you next time.
Bye.